Welcome to another episode of Behind the Feature, under which we're doing a new segment called Feature Bites. Today we're joined by Alap, the former head of data and partnerships at Google. In today's episode of Feature Bites, we're going to have Alap actually explain to us the key components of a product requirement doc or a PRD, which is commonly used by all of us. Alap, it'll be great if you can first take us through what are the key components of a PRD document.
So, the purpose of a PRD document is to actually get started with the development of your product and take it to completion. The PRD is what a marketing person, after having communicated with a functional specialist or a technical specialist, produces to give to the developers. In that, it needs to cover everything that the developers need to know about how to start the build process, what are they building, what technical choices are they going to make, what works, what doesn't work, what does success look like, how will you measure success, and finally, how do you capture what's going to happen next. That entire journey is the product requirement document. So, if I had to take an example of a product requirement document, the first thing you start with is functional and non-functional requirements. In functional and non-functional requirements, the functional requirements are defined as what is it that you want people to do when they are using the app.
Okay.
Non-functional is whatever happens around the time that they are using the app. If I had to take an example, functional requirements of a ride-hailing application is should be able to log in, should be able to create a profile, should be able to select a ride, should be able to book a ride.
Correct.
Whereas what's non-functional is the driver should be well-spoken, the car should be clean, the predictability of when the car is going to come has to be accurate, the time prediction to the destination has to change in real time so that the person is informed. How will you inform that person that the time has changed? All of those become non-functional requirements. So they're still part of your product and service, but they're not core to your application.
Right.
The second step is user stories. Who are the users of the system? Now, interestingly, user stories are not always about the user. For example, a user story could also be about how other systems users of other systems use your product. One classic example of this is in B2B SaaS. Whenever it is that data goes from your system into another system, how do the users of those systems interact with your data? So, who's going to use your product? How are they going to use it? What permissions do they have? How deep in the product can they go? What is visible and invisible to them?
Right.
All of those become user stories. Now, within user stories, and this is also where you actually start diagramming, right? What does a login screen look like? Once they are logged in, what's the first thing that they want to see? The goal in any user journey that you're planning is to get the user to get to their objective of using that feature in the least number of interactions. That also means the number of screens, that also means the number of taps, the number of keystrokes, all of those become a part of that. So the faster you can get somebody to their destination, the better. A classic example of a really fluid user flow is when you open up Uber, once you have logged in, it straight away shows you where you are, how many cars of a particular type are around you based on your previous selection, and what's it going to cost for you, how much time will it take for you to get that. So your first step is already done. Your first step of making the person aware that they can ride, they can book a ride and that ride is going to come fast is done. The second portion is destination. So immediately as soon as you put in the destination, you now know that I have source, I have destination, I need to put them two together, estimate time, estimate vehicle type, estimate cost. Right? So immediately the second step is going to be, if you want to go from here to here, here's the map, here's the cost, here's how soon you can book it. So you now have a very fluid way of selecting how soon can a person get to where they want to. In fact, even when they're trying to type their destination, there are certain common destinations pre-filled on top. So you can quickly tap there and go forward.
So this is the part in the PRD where we actually write our entire happy flows, like the failure flows, and say, here, if this is not a happy path, what happens next, this is the piece.
Perfect. Now, why does this happen before you even select the platform that you're going to work on? Is because once you know what you're building, you will know something called acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria are elementary things like, will the user find this useful or will it become irritating and will they jump off? A very simple example of user irritation that causes a jump off is buffering. So if you have a video player embedded and that video player is taking too long to fetch the video and get it started, the user will abandon that journey. Your objective for acceptance criteria is how will you ensure and encourage people to go through a complete and successful journey. That's your acceptance criteria.
So what is it that I usually write in the acceptance criteria?
In the acceptance criteria, you write things like the video should play within under 1 second so that the user can immediately start consuming what they have come here to consume. Within 2 seconds, I should have popped up all of the immediate vicinity vehicles that are available, which means the application probably sometimes has to become pre-aware of location. Sometimes there are applications that will ask for permission for things that are happening in the app even when the app is not around. And the objective there is not malicious always. Sometimes it is just preloading information so that when you open it up, it's already there. Why does Uber need you to allow it to be constantly aware of your location? Is so that even when it's not working, it's making a small map. Who are the riders that are around you that can take you to your destination?
So,
acceptance is fatigue, is avoidance of fatigue. This is taking too long to do. It's avoidance of utility. I am not getting the answers I want from what I'm looking at. Acceptance is the customer going to be satisfied? So if you're building a dashboard, an enterprise dashboard, acceptance criteria is yes, at a glance, the customer is satisfied with the information being presented to them and now knows that they have to drill down to go further inside. This compared to a failure of an acceptance criteria is you have overloaded the dashboard with too many widgets, too many graphs and too many charts, and a user every time they come have to search, or the user gets biased towards only one type of chart and for the rest of the time they're going elsewhere. So acceptance criteria is not just fully failed journeys but ineffective journeys as well.
In specifically in the acceptance criteria, it's very important to strike a balance between what is doable and what's actually valuable to the customer, right? Even like you're saying, I want to ensure within 2 seconds it loads up, but this is also something that's doable at my end. So how do you create that balance?
So the balance then, so that's where the fourth step comes in of technical selection. You select your stack based on what you want to do. If you realize that you're trying to build a simple dashboard, maybe there is something out there that you can straight away import instead of having to reconstruct screens of your own. Maybe there's a business intelligence tool that you can repurpose or embed to use for your dashboard instead of trying to rebuild it entirely. Another way in which a technical stack gets decided is if largely your customer base, and this is a very common choice, if largely your customer base are mid-income to lower income group people, do you really want to invest in building for iPhones? You probably don't want to because that's completely out of your criteria. So technical and acceptance. I'm okay if all my users are Android users. I will make my technical choices that way because it fits better to my acceptance criteria.
So what would be the key factors? The next phase obviously being technical consideration. What are the key factors that one should keep in mind while writing the PRD at this point?
Okay, so the objective of the PRD is to reduce a developer's dependency on the product managers or product innovators to continue to develop the product.
Okay.
So what you're building what you have to keep in mind is whenever you're building a PRD, the PRD's consumer is a developer. Number one is you're writing for developers, make sure that it is developer friendly. Number two, it has to be exhaustive, but it has to be exhaustive up to the first version. So figure out what part of the PRD is immediately ready right now to be done. Don't include things from your roadmap into the PRD unless if it is essential and it is upcoming. So you want to be probably 2 versions down when you're writing the PRD so that the engineers don't have to rewrite like huge chunks of the application only to suit a downstream need, right? So general direction, but specific direction. Third is when you're doing this, the purpose of acceptance criteria, for example, is to make sure that when you're building, you are building such that you can measure what you're building. So if time is an acceptance criteria, you want to be able to measure time, you want to be able to measure failure. When you're measuring time, you also want to measure things like what was the device the user was on, which connection provider was the user with, Was the user on Wi-Fi or were they on 5G? These are things that start to matter when it comes to expanding on your on what the developer is building. So if you can describe what success looks like, the developer will also know better what they're building.
At the next stage is where we start putting the UI UX wireframe. The question that I have is in what level of detail that one has to go when they're building this, and can you take us through an example of rapid UX prototyping?
Okay, so the easiest, so first is what steps does somebody have to take while designing this? Imagine you being the user of the product. What is it that what's the flow that ideally you can obviously get inspiration from people who are competitors who are already building this, or you can get inspiration from other allied industries who have tried to solve a similar problem. So Porter and Uber are very close in what they want. They all have a source, they all have a destination. Only what is moving is different. So their interfaces will start to look common, and one can get inspired by the other about what they want to build. So you're basically putting yourself in the user's shoes, and you're starting to articulate what exactly does the user need and how further down do you want to go. The level of detail should be, it's less about level of detail and it's the completion of detail. Every journey has a start and an end. Every user journey must have a start and an end as well. And when they end at that time, you have to gracefully exit them. So either bring them back to the home screen, or once they're concluded, take them to a tracking page. The different ways in which you can make sure that they've gotten that. Now, at the end of it, if they decide to swipe up the application, it's great. But if they're doing that mid-journey, then you're actually failing in what you're doing. So make sure that you're taking them through the destination. It's a pleasurable experience, and it's a conclusive experience.
A lot of us have started using Figma, to do the rapid prototyping. Do you have any tools that you recommend?
The easiest tool is a stencil and a whiteboard. Literally have a stencil of what an iPhone screen looks like and use that. Use your whiteboards. Whiteboarding is the easiest. It's clean, it's fast. Take a picture, use that. There was an ancient tool that I used to use called Balsamiq mockups, which was literally dragging and dropping hand-drawn components. Figma is overkill sometimes. I'm also a great advocate of using PowerPoint or Google Slides to use to create UX, because it's a universal language. It's easy for business people to start tuning things there. So the tool you use is less important. Like I said, the completion and the clarity of communication is most important. The fourth piece of a PRD is success metrics. What does success look like? Now, success could be several things, right? Success could be number of predictable user journeys that have completed, amount of revenue that is being generated, cost involved in generating that experience, the value of the end goal, right? When somebody has gone through the entire user journey and produced the result you aimed them to, did that become profitable for them? Did it become profitable for you? Each one of these becomes success criteria. There is success criteria for product, there is success criteria for marketing and growth. Both of those are different. So marketing and growth will look at more revenue metrics, more usage metrics. Product people will look at more failure metrics, success metrics, and volume metrics. Each one has a very different perspective. In most cases, the tool set to measure is common, but the users of the tool set are very different.
After this, in our PRDs, we do have something that is risk criteria. It's that portion of the PRD we'd like to ignore quite a bit of times, but I think it's extremely important. Could you share what should be included?
So I think risk is an undercurrent of the entire document. Acceptance criteria, user journeys, and success metrics. Each one has a risk element to it. The risk fundamentally is if the user changes, if the use case changes, if the environment changes, if the market changes. For every variable, everything that is a predictive variable, can we try and see if we can predict what can go wrong and how do we solve it? So risk has to be an undercurrent across the document, but risk can't drive the development of this document. So risk is like sharing what you have learned in the past, right? This is not work, let's avoid this. So when you're trying to take a technical decision, you may find that there is a totally different set of tools that are currently not approved or contracted by your technology teams, but are better suited to get you to your end goal. You'd rather call that out earlier and allow the product managers to take a decision on whether they want to switch to the new tool set or they want to go back to the contracted one, right? Sometimes some people will spend, and this is kind of talking from experience, people who are on AWS but are looking for functionality that's available on GCP, right?
That's Google Cloud.
Google Cloud. You may spend months on AWS or months on one stack, even GCP, to try and achieve an objective which could have taken minutes to happen on another stack. So making those choices are risk, and that's where you then lean on your engineers to take the right choices.
Okay. What next then in the PRD document?
The PRD, once again, the objective of the PRD is to guide development. So at the end of this, you need to talk distribution. Where is this going to go? How is marketing and growth going to kick in?
Correct.
So it's not necessary to describe the growth plan,
but a GTM plan.
But it's important to include a GTM plan so that the developers know where is this going. The end goal is all of this is to facilitate an engineer developing in the least amount of time with the most cost efficiency, the least number of developer resources, for the fastest time to market to support the growth of the application.
I think, Alap, this has been great. Thank you for joining us on Behind the Feature. If you've liked the episode, do like and subscribe. We come up with new episodes every second and fourth Thursday of the month. So do keep a lookout for some really cool, awesome guests coming up next on the show.